Yo, I'm your baby's mom's new nigga, bro. I'm the new nigga and the new stepdaddy. You don't even gotta worry about seeing them no more. Thank you. I don't want no smoke, bro. I'm just calling you. Thank you.
And my kids, man.
Your baby's mom is.
I don't give a fuck,
I'm
bro.
fucking
I'm
Heather
the
now.
daddy, nigga. Don't call my phone, bro. Don't call my phone with this bullshit, bro.
Hey, I'm just thanking you, bro. I'm
the
thanking
daddy,
you.
bro.
Heather's cool.
Welcome back, everybody. It's good to be back again. It's Faya here on the channel BLACKFIRE-RISING with my man from Dope Nation as well. Knam, what's going on, bro?
Not much, man. Trying to get the day rolling.
All right, all right. Yeah, get the day rolling and stay on top of it, man.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, well, we're back again this time. We were going to talk about, I know before we did a video, we've touched on masculinity and the importance of it, what it means, what it looks like. We've done that in the past. One of the things I wanted to do, it struck my attention. I was looking at this video from Mr. O'Shea Duke Jackson. If you guys are familiar with that channel, recommend you go there and check out the material, like and subscribe if you're so inclined. And then we'll put a link in the description there. This video was called Why Black Men Need to Learn How to Resolve Conflict Before It Gets Out of Control, basically, or before it escalates. And again, we'll put the link to the channel. Man, as I was listening to this video, I was watching it. Some of the things just stood out to me, man, and they struck me as really salient, sort of eye-opening topics. And so I had spoke to you about it and to get your opinion on some of it as well, man. And so we decided to do this follow-up video. Was there anything you wanted to say, man, off rip?
Nope, not really. Like I said, I listened to the video. They made some interesting points, but like you said, we talked about some similar things. So I think it's good to kind of have a back and forth with them, even though it's not live.
Okay, cool, facts. Well, at some points we'll play clips from that video. We don't want to get a copyright strike, and we'll cite a fair use, but man, one of the first things that I sort of thought about looking at this video, and it's not something that they say, directly, but in the Black community, we often use the term Pookie and Ray Ray. We say Pookie, Ray Ray, and we use it to refer to the brothers that's, maybe in a certain social economic condition, even a certain state of mind. Pookie, Ray Ray, you know what I mean? You'll hear people use it when they're talking about somebody that's gonna maybe carjack you, maybe dealing drugs, maybe on the, what they call the underside of the economy, hustling, doing what they got to do to get by, but typically illegal activity, or just sort of kicking up dust and drama, the whole gunshots thing and, breaking in houses, or just the negativity of it. And one of the things that just struck me as curious is that how people and how we can refer to even the term Pookie and Ray Ray. When you think Pookie and you think Ray Ray, these are actual names. So somebody's name is something typically that doesn't change over their whole life, right? Your name is your name, and that's something that's going to follow you no matter what stage of development in your life you are. So at one point you can be in a certain place, and another point down the road, once you develop as a man, you are actually a different person. However, your name is a permanent thing. And I think one of the things we do when we ascribe sort of, when we say Pookie, Ray Ray, we're actually using proper names to describe what I think the question is it just somebody that's in a certain stage of their life at a certain point of their life, right? But it's not necessarily a state of permanence. It's a phase. If it's a transition, no matter what a person goes through, when we refer to people ad hoc, sort of as Pookie, Ray Ray, or even if we say the term, thugs, and we often mean it sort of in that permanent sort of state, like a name we're giving. Uh, is that something that we ought to do? I mean, is that something that's real? Is Pookie and Ray Ray like just Pookie and Ray Ray in a permanent sort of way? Or are we creating or do we perpetuate or speak in a sort of mindset that is casting sort of a permanent judgment on individuals who, we ought to think of more as of in a state of transition? Now, that was sort of one of the first things that I wanted to get your opinion on about that. It just struck me.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's a good point. That's something that stood out to me actually too. I actually wrote that down.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of funny because I mean it was right on point. I mean, almost word for word. Just the idea of it, just how how easy something like that could be a stigma. Like that could stick with you. Like your name Pookie, and you got this idea about Pookies and Ray Rays, and it's like, dang, man, that's so. Um, yeah, I'm gonna leave it to what you said because I agree.
Well, yeah,
I
one of
don't.
the things that I notice about that is, so you can have a child, say a person grows up, say a person is Pookie or Ray Ray, and then they grow up in a sort of lifestyle, in a sort of lane. If you notice, when you hear even grown men talk, sometimes they will refer to that state to validate themselves sort of in a certain way. Because in our community, it can be a blessing and a cursing. Like the Pookie Ray Ray is sort of a blessing and a cursing sort of thing. It's almost like we'll say, I'm thorough, I'm from the streets, I come from this, I seen a lot of stuff, I did a lot of things. And in the Black community, sometimes that's sort of a rites of passage or badge of honor. And so on one hand, while we use it as a negative sort of thing, we'll say the Pookie and the Ray Ray. But then on the other hand, even after a person is grown, it seems like that, or at a different stage in their life, it seems like, even like, say, for example, an Ivy League brother or college graduate brother or a lawyer or doctor, they'll be quick to say, hey, man, don't get it twisted. This is where I'm from. This is how I can get down and stuff like that. So it's sort of like that identity. It is a state of permanence when we talk about identity versus it being sort of a transitional phase. Like, I don't know. That's just one thing that I've noticed about it.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's in a nutshell, it's really all the same. And I know a lot of people like to talk bad about the so-called Pookies and Ray Rays, but it's me. I mean, like you can do that both ways, like you said. Like even the Carltons and Braxtons or the cornball black men, right? Um,
Right.
and then they'll have like it's really the problem to me is that they think that black men have to be like this ideal type of man to be considered respectable. And my thing is that if you're a black man, how I look at it is that you should understand either side of it because you can be a doctor or a lawyer, but let's say you make one mistake. It don't even have to be a big mistake. It could be a fairly common mistake. It could be a DUI or something that happens all the time. But then people will even start calling you this negative stereotype because you really can't even make that mistake without, you just one mistake away from becoming a Pookie or Ray Ray if you was never that in your whole life because the idea of it. So, nobody cares if you got arrested when you was 28, if you get arrested at a certain age and then you have to put that on your job application. They're not gonna care who you were before that because they're gonna be like, oh, this is just a regular Pookie. And it's like, well, I made a mistake in my life. I got in some trouble. However, that's not the lifestyle that I've lived. So I think that either way, the problem is that sometimes we buy into the idea that it's okay to disrespect the black man regardless to what his state may be. So a lot of the things in the video which we're going to touch on, I agree with a lot of the stuff that they said, but the overall idea And what stood out to me is even from the title, it says why black men need to learn, right? And I stopped there because a lot of times people just think that black men don't know no better, or they always need to be taught something, right? And I I pretty much disagree with that on a couple levels because a lot of times we underestimate the fact that black men are constantly in a hostile environment just in America. So depending on how you look at it, a Pookie or Ray Ray might be a more common response than a black man who acts as if nothing bothers him and he's always cool. However, you live in this hostile environment every day and you're not reacting to it, you could potentially say that that's the oddball, that's the odd character because if you have a tame lion, look at wild lions, they might say why are those lions so eager to hunt? They need to learn self-control. If they control themselves, then they can have a zookeeper come feed them, right? And you look at it and you're like, okay, you're judging this type of black man because you not that type of black man. However, you don't understand how you've become tame to feel like you don't want to react because you don't want to be stereotyped as a Pookie or a Ray Ray or an angry black man or aggressive black man. So before there
Okay.
was the, angry black woman, there was the aggressive black man, and then you try so hard to run from that you become this cool cat that don't care about nothing. Everything's cool. You want to be tame, you want to be cool, calm, and collected across situations where you probably shouldn't be cool, calm, and collected. So, like I said, we'll dig into it a little more, but those are some of the things that I just kind of that just kind of stood out to me.
Okay, that's interesting, man. I was listening to you as I was listening to you, and I want to play Angel's Advocate just for a second because
Yeah, for sure.
I think that, and it's not a disagreement, like I'm saying, I acknowledge the context in which you refer to it. Sometimes aggression is when you're in a certain situations, you need aggression. So whether you're going to be a protector, you're going to be a survivor, you got to survive before you can live. Sometimes aggression is absolutely necessary. But I wanted to say, and just using your lions example. So if we're lions out and we're on the savannah, I see you across the field, and I'm on another side here. So I see you over there, but then at my 2 o'clock, there's a band of hyenas, right? So sometimes, and this is my suspicion in
Hmm.
what they're referring to in the video, as far as black men learning to resolve conflicts without violence and aggression, that is in respect to family. So you, who I see, who if you're a lion over there at my 3 o'clock, and then over at my 1 o'clock, there's a band of hyenas. Maybe there's some hunters over there hiding as well. The aggression is appropriate. However, when you see a band of nomad male lions uh, that run together in a band, because oftentimes we'll see that in nature as well. The lions will, they'll meet up, they'll be different, they're not from the same pride. But these males, these young males, instead of clashing, they will decide to form coalitions. And then as they go out together, when they encounter the hyenas or, whatever else is out there, or they're just out there trying to get fed, they don't lose their aggression as lions, but they're still dangerous, except that they have an identifiable enemy. And I think sometimes us as black people, and this is what I suspect they're getting to, as black men, sometimes within the context of the larger society that dictates what masculinity is to us, via all their messaging systems. And they tell us what it means to be a man and what masculine means. And they're constantly giving us these morphing, warping images of masculinity. We wind up living that out, venting our aggression in close quarters, sort of against each other sometimes. Whereas, if you and I, again, if we're like, okay, let's do this sort of project, and you get pissed off at me, or I get pissed off at you, or one of us is late or whatever, or we have different opinions on something, the constructive sort of remedy is, and that, applying to just across situations, I think he's saying, and I'm not sure for sure, again, just being Angel's advocate,
Yeah, no,
but
yeah,
that's another context in which we could see it as well, that Black men across the board, even if you're from different hoods, different geographical localities, or even from different personal past experiences, walks of life. You know, if if dude over there is a Carlton Banks, don't mean we gotta stump him out or nothing like that, or
right,
boot him or
right.
whatever. He might be, useful in terms of, at some
Yeah,
point, they the computer systems, no stereotyping here, but
right,
yeah, man, I get your point, valid. We don't want to be tamed. We need
right.
to remain lions and in the wild, meaning it's a wild world, but
Yeah, and
amongst each other, we sometimes may need to do more coalition building.
and that's definitely true. That goes. I mean, that's obvious. I agree. So, because I mean, like, I've been in situations and I've listened to the guys in the videos, where you just out and you might cross the path of another group of black men, and sometimes you really don't know what to expect or what to do, because you can say what's up to them, and sometimes that might de-escalate it, or sometimes it might,
Right.
depending on where they from, they're like, what's up with you, and you're
Like,
like, oh
what's
man, I'm
up?
just, that's
What
what
the
we say
fuck's
over.
up, nigga? Do
Yeah,
I know you, nigga?
right. So you like, okay, but, and like I said, in my opinion, I think when I look at the overall scope of things, it's it's hard for me to really decipher um what to call that. So I like the fact that we having these conversations, because we should have different perspectives. But a lot of times I just see it as, black men are really in a state, and they have been in a state, just black people in general have been in a state of danger for so long, that I think it's hard for me to say that, we need to think more rationally, knowing that when you're in a constant state of fear, even if you're not really aware of it sometimes, your perception of things are different. And I don't
True.
necessarily think that the Pookies and Ray Rays are doing something um, that they consciously are aware that they're really being detrimental to this overall picture, because they're surviving, right? So it's
Right.
like, and I think we have to start, like, the men who are able to see that clearly, controlling that energy, I think, is more beneficial than saying we need to learn self control before things get deadly, or how to resolve conflict, because violence is a method to resolve conflict. It has been used throughout history. We call it war, right? However, like, the leaders of countries and villages and things like that, they're able to orchestrate and control that energy, where they can say, okay, we're gonna form this thing called the military, or law enforcement, where they let these type of Pookies and Ray Rays, they give them a certain sense of pride and leadership and power, and they pretty much doing the same thing. When you think about the mindset, like, they find ways to control that energy, where they put them in places where that type of aggression, that type of violence, or that type of thinking, or behavior becomes acceptable, and they make it acceptable within that village by understanding that it's not necessarily problematic. Um, However, with us, it's a little more complex, because of the therapeutic aspect that a lot of black men would need to even be disciplined. Okay.
Right.
So the
Right.
discipline and everything does need to come there, which is why, like I said, I agree with where they were going with it and the undertone of it. However, I think we need to venture off into thinking a little more deeply into it, to understand that the black people's situation is always going to be unique, where we're always going to have to look at it from that third eye, right? We can't just use what society is giving us in our basic instincts. We have to dig deeper to say we know good and well that for the most part, the majority of black men, at least in my opinion and in my experience, I don't have a lot of confrontational interactions with black men on a regular basis. I usually come across black men. I mean, if they're not like a jokester or a prankster that's just kind of chilling, trying to have fun, they usually are very cool, calm, and demeanor. And that's the average. And then you get the aggressors who may be emotionally immature and things of that nature, which I think happens across all cultures. And I don't think it's as problematic to say that they don't know any better, or not as problematic to not know any better, but I don't think it's as problematic to say that in order to do better, black men in general need to learn these things, because in general, I think we fully understand it. However, we all react in different because of the hostile environment that we placed in, and we all go about it different ways, which is kind of what we touched on in our video.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. We are in
Take a
unique
different look.
situations. I think uh yeah, man. Well, yeah, we can move on, bro. Cause you know me and you, man, we'll get
I was gonna say we
get
gonna
around. All right. So yeah, I'm gonna play this clip. And it's at the 17-minute mark. We're gonna let everybody listen to this, and we're gonna come back and just give a brief just follow up on that. So hold tight.
In conflict resolution, you want to identify the problem, and then you want to identify solutions to the problem. How can I resolve it? Is it resolvable? And in that process, we have to, I think it is important for us as black men to always be strategic in how we interact with others, and always be strategic in what the outcomes are, depending on what move that we make. And like you said, you don't want to make a lifelong problem based on out of impulse. And so what I teach is to learn to refrain from whatever impulse that is. Learn to show some composure. Learn to be calm and think in an effective manner. Because when our brothers make mistakes in these situations, we're making mistakes in an elevated mood in which we're not thinking logic. We're thinking just basically in a sense of we're going to get back at him. It's more responsive instead of logic. And particularly in these situations with us as black men, we have to start thinking logically. We have to start thinking strategically. We have to look at how is my response going to benefit me long term. And sometimes you have to cut your losses and realize, hey, it's not worth the trouble. It was just $2, or it was just this, it was just whatever, that really has no real meaning in your long-term life.
So yeah, again, that was at 17 minutes. And I thought it was interesting what the brother was talking about, because I know there's a reason sometimes why we respond in a certain way we do, but sometimes, like you said, using a third eye or stepping outside of the situation as much as possible, and using logic to sort of look down the road and say, yeah, what I'm feeling is very real and legitimate. Even my instincts are very real and legitimate. But the logic that I'm going to use is also extremely real and legitimate. So I'm going to, even though what I feel is real, is legitimate, and I could respond, and maybe this person do deserve to get chin checked right now, I'm gonna use the logic and cut that emotional loss, cut that psychological hit I feel like I might take if I don't respond that way. And like he was saying, sort of looking down the road, learning to let go and cut losses. But I think one of the things we have to understand is we have to be honest about the power of pride and emotionalism. It can override the logic, and it can seem more legitimate at a certain time. We can actually feel like we might actually lose something in reality if we don't respond. Like we get cut off in traffic, somebody disrespects us. And that's so valuable to us sometimes that it feels like a very real loss if we don't respond. The same as like losing a wallet or, you know, getting shot through the gut or something. It feels like a real loss. Like we just can't let that go. And sometimes the challenge for me has been in certain situations in the past, for example, just saying, let it go. And then like, damn, am I really hurt? Even after I'm leaving, like, okay, I didn't say nothing. You know, they cut me off, gave me the finger. I didn't follow them. I didn't say nothing. Let me check myself. Am I okay? You know, is something really happening after that? And then in the long term, the logic is like, you know what? It's like trying to go into the deep end of the pool or something, man. It's like, yeah, nothing happened. You know, and the more we're able to sort of do that, I think that that can be part of the tools to untrain sort of the legitimacy of the instincts and the emotionalism. But yeah, you heard the clip, bro. What you got on it?
Yeah, no, and I mean that ties right into kind of what I was saying, and I think that again, this is a great conversation that needs to be had because we need multiple points of views, and I think we all putting something a little different out there. So my thing with what he said is that again, like the black man need to learn to control, right, his anger, or not react so angrily, or in a state of anger people want you to think rationally, right? Where it comes to me, it's kind of borderline of dehumanizing the black man, right? Okay, because you can have emotions, and I do understand that you do. Ideally, you want to think logically so that the situation goes smoothly before it gets deadly. That's what the undertone of the topic is. But as we dissect it, I think we start to see how sometimes we think of ourselves as, you know, not human, or, you know, we can't have these emotional responses because of the criticism around it. For example, if a black man walks into a room and his wife is cheating on him, and in a fit of rage and overwhelming emotion, he kills a guy, right? People will kind of say like, oh my God, man, you know, black people need to do better and learn not to get so angry and stuff like that. And it's like, well, it's not so much that it's acceptable, but it's an understandable response with any other group of people. Now, because people go ahead. Because people, I think a lot of times get used to the idea of you know, black men not being so angry, and they shouldn't be so aggressive, that sometimes we try to control ourselves in situations where it's a normal response for the most part. And then you get to a point where we're not accepting it as, man, that person lost it, and you know, that person lost it, he lost that battle, it's unfortunate that this happened, but I'm not going to think of him as a man who did not have the skills or tools to be self-controlled. However, you know, you're not always going to win that battle.
Right. Well, one thing I would say, brother, is that sometimes we have to use distinctions and be very precise because, and this is for me, I don't know what these brothers are actually saying, but what I'm taking from it is maybe I'm choosing to interpret it in this way. And in any event, this is how I am joining the stream, like from my perspective. In terms of emotional responses and sort of being put in a situation where you're under stress, you're under duress, and you act out, I don't see that as faulting the person for responding that way. I absolutely don't. And I don't see it as being in a situation or having a different mindset because you've been a survivor. I think that that's very legitimate. I think it's real. However, it doesn't exempt the behavior from criticism, because what we want is results. So say, for example, say we're in the hood and we know that we have to fight. And we know that oftentimes if you get disrespected, that you might be able to walk away from something on Monday, but that show of weakness can mean that it's going to come back to haunt you. Somebody's going to try you. It's a certain mindset you have to survive in certain environments. Well, someone coming along and saying, we as Black men, and part of our problem solving mindset, we understand that reality. But I think the larger question is, how do we change it? Because it doesn't produce positive results. It produces prison time. It produces deaths. It produces physical incapacitated men. It produces trauma. It produces stray bullets. So there's a lot of these things that happen within our community. While we can say we understand why it happens, so we're not casting judgment, but we're using judgment to say, okay, out of all our possible tools in terms to resolve the conflict, can we use logic to sort of override things, or just figure out how to approach it? So I think sometimes it's a question of criticism versus casting judgment. I think we need the criticism. And again, these brothers in the video, like, they're self-defined Pookie Ray Rays. So they're saying, I am / was a Pookie. I am Pookie. I used to behave as a stereotypical Pookie. But then what happened is I matured into manhood, and now looking back, when I was in more of a reactive state, now that I'm a man and my logic is more developed, I'm overruling even a lot of my own past decisions, while I both understand why I was there, why I reacted that way. And I'm telling you, don't judge me for that, right? Until you've been in that situation. However, myself, Pookie, as an older man, I'm saying, it's better to use the logic and try and walk ourselves through those situations where it can be done. Not only that, projecting back on his own past, but projecting that also on some of the younger Pookies and Ray Rays, or the younger brothers, because that can be any of us in that social, especially that racial, social, economic state. You know what I'm saying?
And to me, I think that's where the bigger issue lies, is that we don't want, in the Black community, I know I can speak for myself, we don't want the violence. We don't want the unnecessary violence, or what we deem unnecessary violence. We don't want the funerals. We don't want the, like you say, the stray bullets and all that stuff. Like, that's not what we want. I don't think any community naturally craves any type of attention like that in their community, where they feel that they're unsafe. In the presence of their own people, nobody wants to feel unsafe, and that's where I think the goal of the video is that they made. I think that's what they're really trying to create there. And you can hear it in the tone and the things that they said. They really were trying to give some men insight to do better. And I agree with that 100%. And digging deeper into the idea, where I kind of come into that roadblock, is when I look at things from a sense of we're in a state of constant war, whether it be economically, physically, all of these things. I sometimes will take that and say, okay, you wouldn't tell that to an active duty soldier to say, hey, change your mindset in the way that you're reacting to this hostile environment. That's my thing. So I think the conversation has to expand if we want to get that change, because then you'll look at it and say, no, I would never tell my soldier that. But what we're dealing with is that we have undisciplined soldiers. We got people out here reacting to this hostile environment with no colonel, no generals, no structure. But it's not necessarily that the soldier lacks a skill set, because that's what he was trained to do. And I think naturally the Black man is, we all have this instinct of survival, but sometimes that get misconstrued. Like, I don't know of, and in my opinion, I don't know of any gang member in my time that has targeted to shoot a child at a playground, right? But these reckless decisions that happen, innocent people get caught up in the crossfire. However, when people talk about it, they'll be like, it's a shame that kids can't play in the park, and they get killed because of this nonsense, this reckless violence, and that's 100% true. But again, that's the same idea where when you have soldiers in a battlefield, the innocent kid gets shot going to the store because of this war on terror or war over oil and all these things. And people understand things better. Well, we know that's a tragedy. That's always going to be a tragedy, and nobody wants that. You want conflict resolution across the board. However, with black men, I think is not put in the appropriate perspective, because people won't look at it like we're at war, whether it be with ourselves, whether it be with white supremacy or whatever it may be. A lot of times these acts are not happening from rational people who just decided to do something reckless, if that makes sense. So I think the overall, I'm gonna say this one last thing. I think the overall nature of this conversation is to do better, and to understand what we need to do better. I think we need to dig a little deeper.
Well, yeah. And yeah, that's true. But I think there's a distinction between, so in a group, so say if you have a group of people in a whole auditorium and you're talking about quote unquote Pookie's and Ray Ray, and is Pookie and Ray Ray a permanent state of being, as greater racist America would say, or is it a transitional phase that, we're coming up out of, as many of us would say? Within the scope of that auditorium, you can have the same conversation, but everybody in there is gonna have, you can have a whole spectrum of opinions and mindsets, even within the same conversation. So some of the people in that auditorium will raise their hand and say, I think Pookie's and Ray Ray should all just be gotten out of society and locked up. And then some of them will say, in that same room, same conversation, I used to be a Pookie, I used to be a Ray Ray, and now I'm here, I'm hosting the platform. And so we are human, we have redemptive, not only do we have redemptive qualities, we're original humans because we're humane. We were suppressed in a certain situation that brought out more of an instinctive or survival nature. So you will have two extreme opinions, one being an accusation, one being a solution oriented, in the same scope of the conversation. So I think sometimes within these spaces where we're talking about it, we got to learn to distinguish that, acknowledge or understand there's different voices and opinions, so that just because someone shouts really loudly from the back and says, lock up the Pookies and Ray Rays, that doesn't mean that's characteristic of the entire conversation or everybody that's in the presence and contributing. Right. So even if these brothers on this panel were not recognizing certain other parameters of the conversation, that's what we're here for. And so like we're in these spaces and talking about it, while even though greater America will often try and harness that conversation and say Pookie and Ray Ray are a problem. How do we solve Pookie and Ray Ray? Whereas some of us are saying, there's a greater thing happening here. And I think, and just the last thing real quick for me is saying that Pookie and Ray Ray is in a problematic state. It's just an objective reality. It's not saying they have intrinsic character flaws since birth. It just means that there is a problematic state. And then to say, how do we solve this? Because when we look at like how to solve it, I think that's exactly why we're in these spaces like right now. Like that was one of the things that I found most impressive about this video, because then what made me want to do a reaction to it and draw sort of some humble attention to it is because oftentimes we do think of that in states of permanence. We think of where a person's from, how they grew up. You can take a person out the hood, but you can't take the hood out the person. There she go getting ghetto. She's gonna show her black ass. It don't matter if they got a PhD, you know, they still we attach these states of permanence to our men and our women sometimes based on sort of the character, the richness of their character that they may have developed coming up through poverty. But we are not but like you said, in other instances, when it's other races or even other people, their behavior is not seen as being tied to their identity and their upbringing. It's just bad behavior. But with us, it becomes some sort of permanence of a character flaw. Like that nigga's in the NFL, he got all that money, he got an education, but then he still got, you know, he's still sleeping with an Instagram thought. You know, and you can't take the hood out of niggas, see? But when you're talking about these, you know, older white men that were on a Lolita Express, now they're sleeping with somebody's children, flying them out to islands. See, that is a character. That's a behavioral flaw and mistake. Criminal as it may be, it does not get attached to their identity, much less their identity as a category of white males. I mean, if that makes sense, you know.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that needed to be said, and that's basically where I think this conversation has a lot of worth to it, because all the points that you made were absolutely correct. And again, I might say this a few more times, but the guys in that video, I think, did a great job. And it's not one of those type of it's not really even a disagreement. It's just a different perspective. And what they're saying, so that we can get the whole scope of, you know, just different ways that we're all looking at it as black men. And a lot of times I think that we need to have these conversations together as black men, without any other group of people being present.
Right. And man, one thing I want to, and we got one, I was going to fast forward, and I'm going to ask you for your points of the video if you had any takeaways, but I had one more clip I'm going to play in a second. Just one quick side note I wanted to say about this whole phenomena of Pookie and Ray Ray. I think Pookie and Ray Ray is a negative name that a racist society has put on what is essentially can be essentially a survivalist state and mentality. What do I mean? Pookie and Ray Ray can survive in poverty. This is true of Pookie and Ray Ray, surviving in poverty. And sometimes it comes to that. But see, I don't know if we even have like a stereotypical name for the educated, lofty, latte sipping brother. But it's not necessarily true of high society bred people that they could survive in poverty. However, Pookie and Ray Ray can survive in poverty, and Pookie and Ray Ray can also build and become better and also survive with riches. Behavior withstanding. They can survive with money, they can survive without money. I don't know if the counter is true. That if you take a person that was raised in luxury and luxuriance and privilege, if they were suddenly to lose everything, if they could survive in poverty. So in the strictest sense, us as black people, when we think of possibly facing poverty or hardship, or if things get taken away, oftentimes that is going to be one part of our mentality, of a necessary mentality, because you have to be able to psychologically withstand that, and emotionally, and say, I have nothing, I'm gonna survive. America calls that Pookie and Ray Ray. And yeah, it comes along with sort of bad notions of therapy, maybe, you know, substance, or what, you know, people say promiscuity can be sort of parts of people attempting to grapple with hardships. But Pookie and Ray Ray is a condition that happens in extreme poverty situations, and we know, right, that that type of mentality can survive in almost any environment, at least. And I don't know, conversely, if you could take people from upper society and if they were to lose things, if they would be able to survive. So I think part of the something that's funny to me is that, you know, while we deal with the problems in our community and sort of address the mentality and the states that we may be in at any given point in our lives, that we keep that sort of focus and just understand that it can be transitory states of mind, and that I think it helps in general with the attitude of not giving up on our young people or even our people that are even immature.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But yeah, bro, if you didn't have a wrap up on that,
Nope, I didn't. I didn't have nothing else.
okay, I got another clip here. This clip is at 26 minutes of the video, and we'll play it for you all, and then we'll follow up.
The boundaries that men have for one another. Like, for example, look at these young brothers in Chicago. Now, I came up, you know, in an era of gangbanging where, you know, wars and stuff happen, you know, whatever, and murder rate was even higher than it is today. But this whole thing about your dead homies, F your dead homies, you know, putting somebody that's already dead on a t-shirt, you know, guys showing up peeing on some people's stuff, just, you know, not understanding the boundaries. Okay. And then when you find out what the boundaries are, then it's too late. And the reality is that a lot of our black men of any age, we don't understand how to talk to one another at the very bottom level. And the one thing that I learned about working with a lot of black men on the internet, I've worked from, you know, Kevin Samuels, I've worked with Obsidian, I've worked with hundreds of black men, Wode Mai in Africa. I work with black men here in this city, here, everywhere. What I found out is that a lot of ways that black men are, it's not to be taken personal. It's easy for us to get offended because we're dealing with that person, when the reality is that's just how they are, you know? So you could be like, why you don't like that guy? I don't know, I don't like him. But why? Well, I just don't like the nigga. Well, why you don't like him? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah. At the very basic level is, what are men looking for? Black men are looking for respect. I don't care if he is the gangbanger. I don't care if he is the doctor. I don't care who he is. Every black man, almost 100% of the time, if I talk to them like I got some sense and I'm showing them some respect, most black men are going to be human with you.
So yeah, man, on that, I just find it interesting. And I think that that's exactly right. Oftentimes we look at respect and respecting each other. We know that it's very important for black men to get respect. I would say getting respect may be easier than giving it, especially if you're in an emotional state where if you feel traumatized or you're in a sort of fight or flight or traumatized or survival mode, sometimes it may be hard to give respect, because sometimes giving respect, it comes out of a wholeness of respecting yourself, and then you can give it. So sometimes if somebody's down and out, or they're feeling violent or upset, it may not be in them to show respect sometimes. And I think we got to understand that. And maybe to people in that situation, and speaking to myself as well, it may be best to avoid other people at that time. However, those of us, if we're in a position or in a moment to where we are trying to be problem solvers, and we're trying to approach and deal with things in a positive way, that's a tool that we can use. That's something we can project onto other people, whether or not, you know, we realistically expect to get it back at that time. And I mean, just doing it to the best of our ability. Obviously, you know, using our scenario, if you're going by somewhere and you say, hey, what's up, brother? You know, that's extending respect. But if he say, you know, what the fuck with you? You know, I know you know, same response. that's not necessarily a loss. It's not a loss because it didn't cost me anything to extend it. And I have to look at it as if it's not a loss, because looking at it that way, it shows me that it's very little to risk, but a lot to gain. So that even if I don't get that same respect back, I haven't lost anything. And that's crucial moving forward, because I don't get into a mindset of I can't show respect because I might not get it back, which is an emotional wager. In reality, if I extend respect, I don't get it back, or I get ignored. Yeah, it may it may feel like a loss, which is an emotional loss. But like I said, moving down the road, I've not lost anything in reality per se. I just basically felt bad for a moment. I moved on, and I don't allow that to become sort of a psychological staple. But yeah, man, that struck me, the respect notion. What do you think about that, man? How important is that?
Yeah, respect is as important, I guess, as the individual makes it, really. But it's super important when you just think about the overall tone of what respect is and what we generally agree on expect respect to be. A lot of black men do crave that respect because I feel like we don't really get it, not naturally, and we definitely don't get it on the same level as everybody else, like just that general common respect. If you go to a job interview, like you expect to be respected, not for somebody to judge you and look at you or talk to you a certain way because they just think, since you black with braids, I could say, "What's up, man? What you doing? Oh yeah, you cool, girl." Like, no, still be professional like you would be with
Right.
anybody else. So we
Bro,
notice those type of things. Go ahead.
footnote, when you said that, and I'm not interrupting you, just when you said that, just note, people, how he said that distinctively. Disrespect is not always, oh, you black, it's not always outright aggression. Sometimes it's just being too relaxed when, like he said, somebody coming up to you, hey, what's up, my man, and all that, even though it's posed as a friendly sort of greeting or some an invasion of space, an invasion of personal space, coming up, touching on you, inspecting a person, that's also disrespect.
Yeah, it is. It's super disrespectful. It's no different from walking up to, an Asian man, and I might get some heat for this, but saying ching chang chong 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 wow, right? Like you're not going to just do that because it's disrespectful. So you don't get to just say like, hey,
Bro,
I know this is a new era, and people gonna be like, oh my god,
but
but
people don't get triggered, because the parallel, what he's saying is, it's like walking up to an Asian man and saying, hey, let's do some karate, right? Or
yeah,
I'm a karate
that's a
chop
better
you.
way. That's a
Yeah,
better way
yeah.
to do it. But like I said, really just trying to get that point across that again, respect is super important, and then the black man again, because I truly believe the way that we do things is so intimidating to people that they try their best to try to keep us to refrain from reacting naturally, because in so many cases we can blow that off and be like, man, whatever, like I'm not tripping about this. But even sometimes any kind of response comes with a stigma. So like if a black man is like whatever, then it could be, oh, he uppity. If a black man is like, man, what you say to me, then it's like, oh, he aggressive. And if a black man is just like not saying nothing, nobody realized that that's more detrimental to him, but acceptable to everybody else. Like, oh, he plays it cool. He's a cool black guy. The whole time you mad though. So it's like you still understand that you don't have the same opportunities to even be respected, because I've seen people argue in public and nobody called the police. But if a
Right.
black man just raises his voice, because people can be so intimidated by that, it's like, oh, call security. And it's like, wait. I've seen plenty of people curse out, store clerks and cashiers, and nobody calls security. They just say, okay, they work at it from a customer service standpoint. But even when black men react, because we like, man, that was disrespectful, and having that demeanor about ourselves, because I don't think we too anti-confrontational. I mean, in the past we've been able to fight and walk away, blah blah blah. But as that gets more frowned upon, I think that's why that crave for respect can turn violent, because it's like, you know what, now I'm just super impulsive because I don't know what other tool to grab. But I do know that
Right.
I'm tired of being disrespected, and a lot of times that is shown um internally more than externally, meaning the black on black crime thing, right? So it's like we easily can be upset with each other and start fighting and start shooting with each other, but we won't do that with other people. As the man mentioned, that we meet everybody else um, on their level, but I don't think that's really meeting them on their level. I think that's more conditioning than self-control. It's not that you are so self-controlled that you don't snap on the white man or the Asian man. It's more so that you've been conditioned to know what the repercussions will be. So it's going to be a different reaction. It's going to be a different consequence if you get caught by the police, right? The penalties are going to be more severe. So that's, to me, not really a self-control thing. However, to go back to the respect issue, we definitely crave respect, but I think a lot of times in this space, in this environment, we don't know how to get that while fully being ourselves, because ourselves is so unacceptable.
You know.
Yep, and that's the biggest thing, is that in most cases, the black man that's showing that self-control, it always boils down to, I don't want to wind up in jail. And it's true. It's very, very true, but it's also very, very sad that you feel like you can't react naturally because you just don't want to go to jail. And it is very true. And you do want to stay out of that circumstance. So I think that it's important that we start expanding that. When we say meet people on the level that they're at, that should go both ways, not just in a self-control manner, but like meet them where they at and how they demand respect from you. You should meet them where they at in that aspect too, meaning that you should be able to feel comfortable to say, no, I need to be respected just like you need to be respected, and not just meet you where you at, where if a person is hostile, you're just saying that it's cool, I ain't gonna trip because I don't want to go to jail. Because a lot of times that doesn't get, nobody's thinking about that when they spit in your face.
Well, right. And I think that I think overall, I think what you said initially about being conditioned, I think even when you're facing consequences for the exact same risks, there's got to be another psychological conditioning to it, in the sense that black folks will get off on other black folks. And I've heard people say, right, and obviously I'm gonna edit these words, but I don't give a, you know, they gotta get it, get disrespecting me. And they'll get off on a black person, knowing, because a lot of black men that are locked up now, especially when you look at violent assaults and murders, the majority of those are against other black people. The overwhelming majority is against other black people. And black folks know they're taking penitentiary chances, doing everything they do in the hood against other black people. So if it were simply a matter of, I don't want to go to jail, that's yeah, when you're talking about the black man that has something to lose per se, and they know that the cops are going to be called and it's going to escalate and stuff, and you don't want to deal with it, that's a clear-cut case of considering the consequences. But sometimes if you're dealing with, like, if I'm in a Pookie or Ray Ray state of mind, whereas I'm a savage and I don't give a fuck type of nigga, then in that case, what is it that's still causes me to exclusively target other black men?
Right.
So additionally of like not wanting to get locked up or shot or the violence, what's the difference if it comes from me getting locked up from crime in the black community, or getting shot by the cops, or getting shot by the dudes up the block who I'm at war with, or getting locked up behind them? It's still the same ends. So it's got to be another conditioning sort of component on it that says, yeah, you ain't nobody. And like you said, that comes back to, I think the respect component is interesting, and that it always starts with the self, and then you're able to give it. I have a I have a question for you. It's more philosophical. Do you think, and this is my idea, I'll tell you up front, I think it's totally possible and I think that it works. But so I'm going down the street, I see a black man, you know, a young black man, and I say, "Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?" And he either respects it or he doesn't, right? In my personal experience, more than 9 times out of 10, I'd have to put a fraction in there. 9.999. I get love and respect in the community and in the hood. I mean, moving through, like not being involved in nothing per se, but just moving through. It's always love and respect. I don't care what the person is doing or where they're at the time, because that's the vibe in my energy. And so in terms of me projecting, one time I had a dude really go off of me, man, and he was talking a lot. Cause I said, "Hey, what's up, bro?" And something must have just happened, man. And he started popping off on me, stop, you know, whatever. And he was basically like, "You know what? What's up? What did it do?" And I stood there, man. I was driving, but I slowed down. I sort of looked at him, and we just looked for a while. And he moved on. It almost diffused it, but I'm saying like the energy that I was on projected. So sometimes when you, like if I go look in the mirror, I see a black man. And then I can project onto that black man who is me in the mirror, right? So I can set my mind like, I'm gonna have a good day. I'm positive. I'm great. I'm intelligent, whatever. And not feel ashamed of saying that, even though the world told me, don't be that gay, don't be arrogant about yourself. No, I can look in the mirror and say positive things and feel that image with positivity that's across from me, and it winds up reciprocating because it is me. So my question is philosophical, and I think it works, but going out into the community and seeing another black man, even though it's not as direct and instantaneous per se as me programming myself per se, he does see an image of himself when he sees me, and vice versa. If I come and project positivity, right, I'm projecting respect, but I'm also lending it. I'm lending it. So like if I come up to you and be like, "Here you go, man," and it's $10. If I have it to give, I give it to you. Now you actually have it in your possession. It's not just that you have to respond to you have it to where you can do something with it. You can make investments and do all type of stuff with that. And I think sometimes our energy is just like that. So we go out and show respect to the mirror outside as the other black men, and you know, our other half too as well, the woman. But we go show respect to black men. It's as tangible as taking something out of our pocket and handing it to him. If he didn't have self-respect before he came across my pathway, it's possible that his self-respect meter was actually raised in a measurable way just by crossing my path that day, because it's something real and you can lend it out in the same sense. And you know, he may see it when he looks in the mirror or when he sees the next person. I think that's very real. I mean, we typically have spoken of it in terms of like philosophy or just, you know, ambiguous terms like give respect, get respect, whatever. But when you really think about it in that language, I think it's just as real as passing around money, for example.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, especially from the way that you put it, as something, energy that you give into yourself and it's radiating from you like heat, right? You could pass that on. Like, that's a real thing. You can measure that. And I do agree. Yeah, I totally agree that that's something that can be done. I've seen it happen. So I mean, based off of that, I mean, I've definitely seen it just in the things that I do. And I've seen it from other black men that, you know, that inspire me. Like, hey, you know, because even at whatever level you are, sometimes you come across people that can match that level, and then it just reinforces what you've been believing anyway, just about yourself. And you're like, no, this is very real. And I think that we're constantly going back and forth in the black community between black men. We're constantly going back and forth between those energies, because you meet that guy in the scenario that you given, where you radiate this type of self-respect, and you didn't flinch or buckle, but at the same time you didn't escalate the situation, and he saw that, like, man, that dude had self-control. He wasn't running, but he wasn't agitated. So you know what I mean? Like, all of those things radiate, and then 4 blocks down you have a completely different encounter where it fluctuates. Right. And I think we do need to be more conscious of the importance of us who believe that self-respect is important, and that black men deserve respect, and we want to see each other do better, to not underestimate that. Like, don't go backwards because you feel like, oh, that's not enough, or you had a positive exchange and then that guy went 2 blocks down and had a negative. To me, that's not important. What's important is that you stay consistent, because the more that we see that, and the more that happens, I think that that's a part of what we need to do to change the scope of the black community, and we need to be on bigger platforms, because that's the only other thing, is that you could turn on the television and they're not gonna see too many black men with the attitude like that you projected. And I think that is where we have a huge disadvantage as far as showing how common it is for black men to get along with each other, is that we have to live in the falsified and the non-reality, the make-believe of the black male, more than we do in the physical world, because we're not interacting with each other that much.
Right. So yeah, to me, it's a manifest level when people talk about the notion of spiritual warfare. No matter what, just even in certain belief systems and religions, the notion of spiritual warfare is not new. In sort of a Christian or a Hebraic vein, you think of actual entities warring with each other. But I think, like, the order and the notion of a spiritual warfare, it's not just exclusively like for angels or demonic forces, or even just sort of any other sort of non-physical entity you might want to ascribe to that. But I think that the nature of us as well, in the sense that we're not all physical, we have minds and intelligences, which is non-tangible, that you can't actually see, but they're obviously manifestly real, because we're here thinking, talking, and conversation. Such an immaterial component to us. Why do we not think that engagement in warfare actually also happens on those levels as well? So whereas the nature of the energy I was coming with and the nature of that brother's energy, right, there was a clash that happened. It was an actual clash. Had we clashed, had I had negative energy to clash with his, that would have manifested in the physical clash. But since I think that my sort of fearless calmness at the time actually was victorious over the intensity of his own energy, right? That we saw that manifest in reality, right? He was sort of defeated on a spiritual sense, not taking a loss per se, but defeated.
Right.
And I don't know if we ever posted that video we did when we talked about quantum entanglement and revolution.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we posted that, but I feel like we did, man. I'm gonna have to go double check.
That it just brought that to mind, because I think that when we think of things in terms of like me having an energy of respect, for example, or a mindset of respect and projecting that through space and time to another person, that's more like an emanating factor. But I think that is probably like an entanglement sort of sense, in a way where it's instantaneous. Like if that person comes within proximity, that positive energy is instantly felt and shared. Not that it's something you can block with the partition per se between two people, but I think that it instantly resonates like sort of like an entanglement. And you know, that was a whole nother conversation we had as to the nature and definition of like entanglement, like do things instantaneously mirroring.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
exactly
man, if
what
we
came to
didn't post
mind.
that one, we should post that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to double check because I could reference it too, but I will double check and see if that's posted because it might have been a part of a bigger topic or something.
But yeah, bro, I guess, you know, do you have let you take us out today, man?
Uh, well, like I said, all I wanted to do was first of all, just shout out,
Yeah.
for doing this thing, man. That was a good topic. Again, I think we need to focus more on this topic in particular and expand on all the components to really start making that change. And you know, shout out to you for coming with the good questions, man. You had some good questions, some things that I'm gonna sit and think about. I hope everybody else sit and think about what we talked about as well. But again, to try to get black men on a platform where we can talk about these issues from our perspective with only us, I think is where all of this is heading, because we're starting to see that nobody's gonna understand to the extent that we understand each other, and that's why we don't necessarily always need other people's input because we can figure this
Right.
out and we understand it, and it's just good to see that more black men are really starting to come together and build these platforms in unity. That's a great thing.
Respect, respect. Well, thanks, man. With those words, man, we'll close out. And I'll end with words not my own, but just say, yeah, again, we invite you all to check that video. I will post the link down there. And yeah, stay tuned. Stay tuned to hear Blackfire Rising. And shout out to Dope Nation.
Yes, sir.
All right, we out.
Yeah.